Hello, friends, and welcome into NBA Now, brought to you by Manscaped. You can get free shipping and 20% off if you head over to manscaped.com/chat. We're going to break down the latest NBA news and rumors today, beginning with some draft talk around the Golden State Warriors, who might just end up getting the #1 overall pick in the 2020 NBA draft if the lottery ends up going their way. Now, the report from the San Francisco Chronicle was that if the Warriors get that #1 overall pick and they keep it, i.e. they don't trade it for a player or a bunch of different picks, the plan is to take Anthony Edwards out of Georgia with that #1 overall selection. It is, to be blunt, not a great NBA draft class. It's not as strong as some of the more recent ones. Edwards might be the best of the bunch. He has a lot of upside as a scoring guard. Did that quite a bit at Georgia, even though everyone playing Georgia knew you had to stop Edwards. The shooting was not ideal. That is a bit of a red flag. Now, the different report from Anthony Slater of The Athletic was that the Warriors had not yet met with Edwards. They had met with other prospects on some Zoom calls. The Warriors hope, of course, that they're going to be able to meet with prospects in person. That, of course, isn't yet set in stone. That remains to be seen. Two of the prospects they did meet with on those Zoom calls, James Wiseman, I guess Memphis still applies, technically speaking, center who barely played this year, has not played very much basketball in the past year, thanks to some issues with eligibility for the Memphis Tigers. LaMelo Ball is the other prospect that they've met with there. He might end up being a top 5 pick, and clearly the Warriors are interested at some level in adding some guards. Now, the Chronicle also mentioned that the next 3 names on this list were options for the Warriors if they trade down or if they end up getting that picks between 2 to 5 in the draft lottery. Tyrese Halliburton, the guard out of Iowa State. Isaac Okoro out of Auburn, is a very much defensive-focused 3, hopefully 3 at some point, but very much a defensive-minded player. And then out of Israel, Denny Avdija, the kind of swing guard, 6'9", had some shooting there. Interesting options. I'm a little surprised Obi Toppin wasn't listed on here, but those were some of the other names beyond Anthony Edwards the Warriors could go with. If, of course, there is no trade, I'm sure the Giannis rumors aren't going to go away anytime soon. Now, the lottery odds, which as a reminder will not take place until after the NBA completes the little 8-game return to schedule. More on that, by the way, in a second, those games. The Warriors, Cavs, and Timberwolves all have 14% chance to get that #1 overall pick. The Hawks at 12.5%, and the Pistons checking in at 10.5%. So if the Warriors get that #1 overall pick, or even if they don't, if they're picking 2 or 3, who should they end up taking? Who should be their dream target? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section, and I will limit this to players in the draft and not trade it for superstar player that Golden State fans would love to get. As promised, let's talk a little bit more now about this the NBA schedule, more or less. As I'm sure many of you know, they're bringing on a whole bunch of teams, 22, to play 8 games before the playoffs begin. The goal, of course, here is to have those games begin July 31st. That, of course, assumes that there isn't a setback for the NBA in terms of how they deal with the Big C. The aim is to start training camps on June 30th at local facilities and then move on down after that and get in place where they'd be able to play in Orlando and get Orlando camps going later on in July. So some notable dates for the return, right? Again, June 30th, start of camp. July 7th, everyone heads on down to Orlando where the quote-unquote bubble will be. July 31st is when regular season games are hopefully set to resume. And then October 12th is supposed to be the last possible date for NBA Finals games. That is the hope and the plan for the NBA for the return of basketball, which at that point, if it is in July, you'd be approaching a 5-month gap, which is crazy to think about. But if you're like me, you're just glad that the NBA is planning to come on back. And if you're just like me there, I want you guys to like this video because I've missed basketball. This is a very weird time. Here we are in June and there's no NBA Finals. It doesn't feel, or NBA playoffs at all. It just doesn't feel right to me. So if you're excited about basketball coming back, I want you guys to like this video. Now, officially, the NBA has not yet announced the schedule or a plan or exact dates or anything like that. That should be coming out soon. However, CBS Sports kind of connected some dots. I think they're going to be right on this. The likely assumed plan here is that each team will end up playing the first 8 games on their schedule who are left against the teams who are also going to be in Florida. And almost every team has 8 games against the other teams that will be down there. However, not every team actually has that set up. Now, those teams are the Lakers, the Heat, the Magic, and the Blazers. I believe the Blazers actually only have 6 games against teams who are going to be down there in Orlando. So the NBA would probably have some variations of matchups against these particular teams. It's interesting what the NBA ends up trying to do. I think they're trying to keep it 8 games for everybody just so that, they get the same amount of ramp-up time as they get closer to a playoff push. Reminder here, by the way, if there are playoff ties, the tiebreakers go down to strength of schedule, which could be an issue because even with each team playing 8 games, not every NBA team will have played an equal amount this year. Welcome to the chaos that is the 2020 season. Now, so when we get to the finals and the playoffs and all of that, who ends up winning? Is it the Lakers, the Clippers? Do the Raptors maybe make a miracle run? Or do the Bucks end up maybe being the favorite out of the East? So let me know what you guys think in the comment section as to who will win the 2020 NBA Finals. Told you earlier, today's show was brought to you by Manscaped. Manscaped.com/chat gets you 20% off the Weed Whacker, which is the best nose and ear hair trimmer out there. As I hope you all know, Father's Day coming up soon. The Weed Whacker's not a bad gift for your dad, especially if he's got some nose and ear hair that needs trimming up. Producer Alicia can confirm, by the way. Nobody likes nose and ear hair, especially your girl, so take care of it. Manscaped.com/chat. That gets you 20% off the Weed Whacker or any of the other products out there. This one is the single best nose and ear hair trimmer. In large part, it's not going to awkwardly pull and tear and rip out your hair. It's going to make it easy on you. So go check it out, manscaped.com/chat. Let's talk trade now. The New York Knicks. The Post reports the Knicks will consider trading Randle. He's due $18.9 million next year. There's also a team option in the 2021-2022 year. So it's an interesting spot for the Knicks, and this is not the first time and not the last time we've heard about a player potentially being shopped. There is once again a new regime coming in for the Knicks, and that means some players that they've added maybe don't fit in quite as well as they previously thought. And for Randle, who I want to emphasize was not bad this year. Don't get me wrong on that. But he wasn't as good, especially on offense, as he was with the Pelicans. The field goal percentage, the three-point percentage, it all dipped. The points per game dropped a little bit, but to have the efficiency go down is a red flag for Randle, especially from beyond the arc. The field goal percentage was below his career averages. The rebounding was good, though. Randle remains a very good NBA player, still very young, will help out NBA teams. But for the Knicks, maybe they try once again to push the reset button, which might mean trading away Randle. But should they do it? I want to hear from you guys. Type Y for yes or type N for no if you believe the Knicks should trade Randle and once again move on from one of their high-priced players. Let's go over now to Chicago. Jim Boylen, fate not looking great. His job status very much on the hot seat. I think it makes sense. The Chicago Sun-Times reports that the new front office for Chicago plans to move on from Boylen because, well, he's just not very good. The record indicates that. He's had reported some issues with some players. Now, the interesting part here for me is the report from the Sun-Times that Sixers assistant Ime Udoka is actually the frontrunner to get this job, with Raptors assistant Adrian Griffin also in the mix. Now, Udoka's last 5 jobs were, well, not all coaching. The Sixers assistant this past year from 2019 to, of course, now. A longtime Spurs assistant, but before that in 2012, he was still playing in Spain, but also in the NBA for the Spurs and for the Kings. I'm, in general, more in favor of Greg Popovich coaching tree options, although didn't fare all that well for the Bulls' current coach. So not everything is a guarantee there. It's an interesting path here for the Bulls, but I do think change is needed. I know many Bulls fans feel the same way I do. Front office change was very much needed on top of that, so that's a very good sign there for the Chicago Bulls. Hopefully head coaching change is next up. So who should the Bulls hire as their next head coach? Do you think it should be Ime Udoka? Is there somebody else in mind? You can certainly cross off Tom Thibodeau, who the Knicks apparently want. And of course, he ain't going to go back to Chicago. So beyond him, maybe you got somebody else in mind. All right, back to the NBA now. Here's some more notes on their replacement player plans. Excuse me, that's kind of a tongue twister there. The NBA is working on that plan to allow NBA teams to have access to replacement players in the event there's a rash of injuries or a rash of illnesses when everyone is down in Orlando. Now, there's not going to be a limit on the number of players a team could sign to replace someone, but the in-place roster limit would likely stay. The NBA does not want to go from 15 to 17, which means that if you sign somebody, you got to more or less sideline someone for at least the time being, if not the rest of the year. I do want to make a note here. Players like Jamal Crawford, specifically mentioned in this ESPN report, are not going to be eligible. You're not going to be able to sign veterans. I think Darren Collison would also not be eligible here off the top of my head. You're not going to be able to sign players who haven't played this year. The eligible replacement players have to be G Leaguers or two-way players or players who were on a roster and were then cut, or players who spent time in a team's training camp. Basically, if you were on a roster at some point this year, you would be eligible. Who would not be eligible, though, are those who haven't played this year, didn't end up signing, and that includes Jamal Crawford, that includes someone like a Darren Collison. Those players would not be eligible. I also want to make note that the NBA teams are attempting to allow maybe more of expanding the rosters to 17 just to build in some exceptions there. And they want some of their G Leaguers, especially some two-way players, to come down to Orlando as well. But so far, the NBA hesitant to do that because they're trying to keep the just number of players and staff for each team as low as possible.